Hello and welcome to Byjus Exam Prep IAS. As part of a comprehensive news analysis, today we'll be discussing 5 important topics out of the Hindu newspaper, daily edition. Before we begin, some important announcements for you. First, that we're available on Telegram. So do download the app via the QR code given here or the link given in the description below and not miss any of our videos. There's also another important announcement that our magazine is now available for download via the link given in the description below. And now we are collating 6 different sources: The Hindu, Indian Express, Kurukshetra, Yojana, Down to Earth, and the Science Reporter to create this magazine. So this could add to your preparation generally. So you should download and read our magazine in that regard. And also that we have the International Relations this week, episode 89 this week by Chetan sir. You should also not miss that video on YouTube, so do subscribe to our channel on YouTube and on Telegram both. With this, let's begin the analysis. First is the IMF's growth projections for this year and thereafter. So the International Monetary Fund, important organization, we have already discussed previously how the World Bank has revised its projection for the year 2022 and thereafter for 2023 also. And this is in line with that because the RBI, the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, have all revised their projections for growth. And when we talk about this year, though it is quite optimistic, still next year it is going to be a major problematic year for the world generally because of the recessionary trends which are coming in at this point of time. So before we go into the basic topic itself, this is an important topic for you which has been brewing up for the past 1 month. So we saw last week with regards to World Bank, then before that RBI, and today the IMF. This is a very important concept. Why? Because at the end of the day, the world's projection of growth is very, very important vis-a-vis India's projection of growth. And though India is still holding on to that 6% mark, the world is slowing down because of the fact that there are too many issues, and those issues become important for our preparation. So when we will read this topic, we will not concentrate on the raw data, but we'll rather concentrate on the basics of why is it happening, because that could be used in the exam to explain most of the things. So India's projected growth was now at 6.8% in the current fiscal year, which is quite less to what it was last year, with 8.7% growth in the fiscal year by the end of 31st March last year. However, this report, the World Economic Outlook Countering the Cost of Living Crisis, is something which always becomes a guiding light for all other policy measures, because the growth rate for the year for India has been revised downward by 0.6 percentage points relative to what it had predicted in June of 2022, and this is based on the weaker output in the second quarter, and more than that, the subdued external demand as of right now because of the inflation in the world, which we have been also discussing quite a lot on this platform. So first and foremost thing, IMF has revised its basic projection for India, which has now become 6.8%, which is 0.6% lower than what it had projected in June of 2022. However, what is more important for us is this data which is given in the box, which is that now our basic growth is hovering between 6.5% to 6.8%, with RBI's estimate at 7% for this fiscal. But more than that, we are not concerned about the raw data. What we are more concerned about is why is that India is experiencing this revision of output, revision of growth rate. That is based on the Russia-Ukraine crisis, the tightening of monetary conditions globally, the high inflation, and that too the 10-year peak which we are seeing in Europe itself, and the lingering effect of the pandemic. Now let's try to analyze each of these separately. First is Russia-Ukraine crisis. We already know that that is technically creating a major energy crisis in Europe. Therefore, the high inflation and the first point is actually linked together, which is that Russia-Ukraine is in turn leading to high inflation in Europe. Therefore, all across the world, demand is slowing down because the inflation is quite high and at a 10-year peak in Europe itself. Then let's talk about the monetary policy. Because inflation is quite high, monetary policy is being tightened up. So the basic approach of all central banks at this point of time is to stop lending, to stop the circulation of money in the economy. Therefore, the pandemic itself had already slowed down most of the things. We were on a recovery. However, Russia Ukraine has now created such a roadblock that it is leading to inflation leading to now a stance which is taken by even our RBI, which is to mop up all the liquidity in the economy and make sure that the inflationary trend is technically controlled. But the lopside of this is that if you try to go for a very tight monetary policy, it can then in turn lead to recession. Therefore, what the IMF is actually arguing is that though India's projections are okay, next year could be a year in which the world could see a type of a recession, because all this tightening could lead to the demand going down, consumption going down, and that is more dangerous than what is happening right now. So the world at this point of time, though India is projecting for 6.8%, 6.5%, 7%. We are within that 6 to 7%. That is quite healthy in that regard. And I will also contextualize the 6.5% and 7% with everything else. The more important point is the world as a whole, the growth rate will slow down from 6% to 3.2% in 2022 to 2.7% in 2023. And this is more dangerous, which is that there is a major decline in world GDP growth, and that is based on this cascading effect of the Russia-Ukraine crisis. So the US is expected to grow at 1.6% this year, followed by 1% next year. So again, a slowdown. The Euro area from 3.1% this year to 0.5% next year, and China itself is slowing down from 4.4% to 3.2%. So the biggest three economies in that regard, the US, the EU and China, in a way are actually slowing down. So if that is the case, it could have a cascading effect all over the world, and that could even lead to more recessionary trends. As much as we are right now seeing inflation can be tackled through certain means, but those certain means in turn can also lead to deflation or recession in that regard. So India's 6% and even the next year's projection, which is still within 5 to 6%, is quite good with reference to what is actually happening in Europe at this point of time, or in the US or in China. So if we go on further and analyze the basic point, we know, and the chief economists and even the IMF, the World Bank, everybody is saying that the largest three economies, the United States, China and Euro area, all are stalling. China is going out of intermittent lockdowns itself. There's a major real estate crisis there. Over and above that, there is also the issue related to how manufacturing and inflation in China is also getting affected because of Russia, Ukraine. So the first aspect is, does India's growth story look optimistic to what is happening in the world? Yes, it is. However, what is the basic outlook of the world? It is very, very concerning that the biggest three economies are showing contraction. If that will contract, Indian export demand can contract. If that will contract, then Indian economy can contract. Basically, it will be a cascading effect. If there's a recessionary trend, what the IMF is technically predicting, that there could be a recessionary trend next year, with regards to how the different measures right now for inflation are working. Whenever there will be monetary stance which is non-accommodative and which is technically about tightening, it can lead to deflation. If not deflation, recession for sure. What is going to happen is consumption is going to fall very quickly, demand is going to fall very quickly. As it is, the income at this point of time is making no sense because of the high inflation. So people will start to cut down on their demand, and in turn lead to a spiral which is even more dangerous. Be it employment, be it manufacturing, be it services, be it generally the economy, import, export. The world at this point of time is slowing down in its growth projections, and which is not a good trend in that regard. More than that, what the IMF has also pointed out in this report is that a large number of low income countries, and this is what we call as debt imperialism of China, and too many of them are under debt distress, and that too because of China itself. So because at this point of time China has mostly stuffed money into Africa, even Pakistan, Sri Lanka is also a good example. At the end of the day, they all have to repay these loans, and they are struggling to. So whilst there is a very pessimistic picture of what is happening all across the world, there has to be a solution. You as a UPSC aspirant will always need to have a positive outlook. How do we come out of this? We come out of this, what the IMF is also pointing out, is through fiscal policy. Fiscal policy how the budgetary caps and how the government is spending. If the private sector is slowing down, the government needs to spend, and fiscal policy needs to assist economies which are volatile at this point of time and need to invest in human capital, supply chain diversification, digitization, and green economy and green energy, because energy crisis at this point of time is a major disaster in making, and green energy is the solution. So India is doing much better than anybody else in 2022 and will do equally good in 2023. Having a big population in that regard is an advantage for us. However, what should we make out of this report? And this is why we are here. First and foremost thing, India is doing better than anybody else. Second, yes, there's a revision of 0.6%, but when we look at the larger picture, it is nothing. India is hovering between 6 to 7%. That's also not a problem. But what are the reasons? The reasons is Russia-Ukraine, intern-linked inflation. However, this is in turn leading to monetary policy becoming a little bit non-accommodative, contracting, or the central banks are trying to control the money flow in the economy to curb inflation. And that in turn could lead to a deflationary trend or recessionary trend in the coming years or next year itself. And the pandemic itself was a problem for everybody. So it's a slippery slope. We need to see how the world economy goes. If the world is slowing down, it's not good for India, because India's export economy and exports should not shrink or contract at the same point of time. So therefore, it's a very cautionary tale. It's an important report. And for your preparation, we have now 4 reasons which can be quoted for any question related to inflation. First, why is there inflation? And second, how does fiscal policy help in curbing inflation? Governments have to take into account different strategies which are over and above the basic strategy of using repo rate, reverse repo, and they have to go into certain diversifications of supply chains or even human capital, because people are the future. And if we have to diversify their skill set, we need to do that also. So this topic is important. This has been brewing up for the past 3 to 4 days, and we have been talking about it for the past 1 month through different CNAs, that how the World Bank first changes projection, now the IMF has. Both the Bretton Woods twins have now argued that at the end of the day, the world is slowing down, the growth is slowing down, India's growth projection is slowing down. But if you look at it comparatively, it is quite optimistic in that regard. Let's move to the second topic now that we have an understanding of the IMF projections, which is the pendency rates in the RTIs. Now, when we talk about Right to Information Act, it was always projected as one of the most important moments in transparency and when we talk about accountability in the world. And the RTI in itself is a very important innovation and was very specific to Indian story of transparency, accountability, and good governance. However, the recent report by the Satark Nagarik Sangathan has pointed out to a very, very alarming trend, and now we need to take into account these issues and also understand the implications to representative and accountable democracy. So after 17 years of the introduction of the Right to Information Act, the transparency regime in India is now in a major crisis because of nearly 3.15 lakh complaints and appeals pending in 26 different information commissions across India. This report has pointed out that year on year these complaints are increasing, and this is alarming, this is concerning. As a citizen, it is concerning because we have the right to ask information from any governmental body with regards to getting the reply within 30 days. And if the reply is not coming within 30 days, then they have to give an explanation the next 15 days why it is not coming, and we can get that information in the next coming months. So the first time period is 1 month. Thereafter, the agency will communicate to you why it has not been able to furnish that document or that information in the next 15 days, which is 45 days period. And thereafter, they will in that letter tell you by when they will give you the information in that regard. So there's a very robust mechanism in this. You will get some form of reply within the first 45 days. And this is very, very significant. Now, what this is showing us, that there are 3.15 lakh cases for which no reply has gone. And this is not a joke. This is not something very, very lightly to be taken. Because if you look at the basic data, from 2019 to 2021 to 2022, from 2,18,000 to 2,86,000 to now 3.14 lakh pendencies, means that there are 3.14 lakh people who have not got information which they seeked from any governmental organization or its subsidiary. Now this is even more concerning, because if there is a backlog which has been created for 3.14 lakh cases, any other information sought hereafter will also be delayed. So the number of complaints has been increasing in these 26 information commissions since 2019, from 2.18 lakh to 2.33 lakh, to the rise in 2021 to 2.86 lakh, to now 3.14 lakh. This is an alarming trend, and the highest number of pendencies are in Maharashtra at 99,000, followed by Uttar Pradesh 44,000, Karnataka at 30,000, and the Central Information Commission has 26,724, and the Bihar Information Commission has 21,000 pendencies with regards to RTI. Now this in itself shows you what governance is and how governance matters in a certain area or in a certain state. And if you look at it, even the Central Information Commission has an pendency of 26,000 cases. So why are we doing this topic? We're doing this topic because RTI is the backbone of representative democracy, and the fact that it has created a transparency regime, an accountability regime. It was important for curbing corruption in India. Now when we are seeing such high pendency, it becomes an important implication to how the government seeks and looks at our basic questions and queries, and how RTI is now being misused. If not misused, it has been ignored. And more than that, this basic data tells you that big states, Maharashtra, Uttar Pradesh, Karnataka, Bihar, these states have so much pendency that if they start today, it would take them at least a year to cover these basic data. And these questions, this information could be very, very crucial to the people who have sent it. For you and me, it may be nothing. For the state, it may be nothing. But for that person who has sought that information under RTI, it is a very, very big thing. The story does not stop here. What we see is that there is even more dangerous precedents created, and the basic regime with regards to RTI is now being dismantled or diluted. So two information commissions, Jharkhand and Tripura, out of the 29, they have more or less been defunct, and Jharkhand 29 months and Tripura 15 months, no case has been cleared. So they have totally become defunct information commissions. And Manipur, Telangana, West Bengal and Andhra Pradesh are without any chiefs. So the state chief commissioner, he is not there. So there should be one central chief information commissioner, and there should be, every state should have one state information commissioner. These four states don't have their state information commissioner. So there is no executive on the top. So only 5% of all positions are occupied by women, which is even more concerning when it comes to the skewed gendered ratio. Also, several information commissions, including the Central Information Commission, are working at reducing capacity with less than stipulated number of the people who are working in the office. Under RTI law, the Information Commission are the final appellate authority and are mandated to safeguard and facilitate people's right to information, which is technically not happening. And over and above that, there is a penalty for not answering. But what we see is that the analysis of penalties imposed shows that the commissions did not impose penalties in 95% of the cases where penalties were potentially plausible. So what we are seeing is that the Information Commissioner itself is not providing any answers, and it is not ready to even punish any body which would have furnished some form of information. And the fact of the matter is that the authorities which should have been punishing the different bodies for not sending these basic information are also the ones who are defaulting. So what we see is that this point is very, very significant, which is that though there were plausible penalties which should have been applied, 95% of the cases penalties were not applied on either themselves or on the bodies which should have furnished this information. So when we look at this basic trend, it is an alarming one and it is a dangerous one. Further, what we see is that in a separate report by Transparency International, 1/4 information commissioner posts in India are vacant. Only 5%, total 8 are women information commissioners in the country. Another total post, 165 posts for information commissioners, 42 are vacant, including 2 chief state information commissioners. So let's try to understand this topic in much more nuanced and holistic way. First is that RTI is important. RTI is important for the transparency regime. It is important generally for accountability and good governance in India. It was seen at one point of time as one of the most important developments, and it became a flag bearer for accountability all across the world. However, we have been seeing for the past 4 to 5 years, RTI has been diluted very systematically. But more than that, this is even more alarming that there are close to 3.14 lakh cases pending with different institutions, be it the state or the central information commissioners. And more than that, information commissioners positions, be it the subordinate ones or the chief, are vacant at this point of time. So this is an alarming concept. It can come in GS paper 2 as a mains question that RTI dilution is an issue, and this report gives us an even more holistic picture about it. So I can't emphasize enough how important this topic is, and I can't emphasize enough how this can come in the mains examination as a very simple question with regards to how RTI has been diluted. And now we have basic information with regards to how information commissioners are not appointed, information commissions are empty, and 3.14 lakh pendencies is not a joke, because at the end of the day it means any further information will be delayed. And because the institutions are not penalizing the institutions which need to furnish information, there's a basic precedence for corruption and lethargy within the system itself. So the first topic was IMF, the second is about RTI. With this, let's try to understand the third topic, which is related to the NCRB data on suicides and digital media. Now, what does this topic talk about? Before we go into the nitty-gritty, first point is technology is a double-edged sword. People believe that suicides and generally cyberbullying or stalking on the digital media is leading to a lot of suicides in India, and the NCRB data is showing a very alarming development with regards to that. There's a major quantum of deaths related to suicide. However, the authors technically try to argue that whilst technology is a problem, it is not the core problem. So they try to point out to the Tamil Nadu case where a whole flurry of very sensationalized suicides happened because of the online rummy game. Therefore, there came an ordinance from the Tamil Nadu government which banned all games which were involving money. But what happens in that case is that the Tamil Nadu government is not realizing that that is only a small quantum of all suicides. When we talk about suicides itself, suicides are much more systemic to the mental health of that person, and it's not just games or technology. Yes, there is a connection between technology and suicides, but at the end of the day, there is a need to understand suicides in a much more holistic way. More than that, this topic is related to mental health, which is becoming an ethical issue also with regards to emotional intelligence, and more than that, something related to social issues. So what this article is technically talking about, before we go into it, is that technology is, yes, a problem, but is also a solution, and we need to understand suicide in much more holistic manner in each and every aspect than just understanding it as a basic byproduct of the digital world itself. So every year when the NCRB, which is the National Crime Records Bureau, releases statistics on deaths by suicide, it is increasing each and every year, and technically the call for intervention becomes louder and louder. And the most recent of this, of the 2021 data, which was released on 30th August 2022, shows that 1.64 lakh people lost their lives this year just because of suicides. So what is the core issue? The core issue is that though we are still in 21st century, death by suicides is one of the major reasons for social distress and public policy concern at this point of time. And it is quite unfortunate that the families which are involved in the suicides are not able to rationalize why it happened. And one of the cause for suicides, and this is a major discussion which is happening at this point of time, is that there's an link between the digital world and digital technologies and suicides in that sense. However, what we feel is that yes, suicides are a problem with regards to cyberbullying, loss of self-esteem due to social media, extreme binge watching of online content, heavy reliance on virtual followers and communities for validation is contributing to the issue. We live in the world of likes and TikTok and Instagram, and that is the problem. So though there is a connection between technology and the human condition, that is only half of the picture. Because the flip side to this is that technology is neither the core of the problem, neither the perfect solution, but suicides need to be understood in a much more holistic sense, because suicide is a reality which society must respond in the most sensitive and holistic manner. This must focus on a comprehensive understanding of the issue, and in that case, the authors talk about the Tamil Nadu issue, and the Tamil Nadu issue is very simply the fact that there were several incidents of gaming addiction and online rummy games. The Tamil Nadu government responded by putting in ordinances which banned these games. However, what Tamil Nadu government did not realize is that that is one of the issues. Family problems, illness, substance abuse, marriage or love related issues contribute to more than 2/3 of all suicides in India. And more than that, just by following this top down policy that whatever happens we respond to it, we need to focus not on these high profile cases but on the inclusive development of community based mental health and suicide prevention in that regard. And this is a very important point which the article is making for the UPSC, because at the end of the day, mental health has become a very important concept in India at this point of time. And because there's a whole ethics paper, GS paper 4 and the GS paper 2, social issues and ethics becomes important, because emotional intelligence is something which we look for in an IAS officer. Therefore, mental health becomes important. Now, technology, as much as it has contributed to all the problems, is also a savior in that regard, and the central government has realized that, because it is already running a potential plan with regards to how to use technology to prevent suicides and improve the mental health of the citizenry. And in February, they also announced National Tele Mental Health Program to provide access to free round-the-clock mental health interventions in remote and unserved areas. Now, the point is very simple. And before we move on to the last two topics, I would like to give you a summary here. First is that we tried to understand the IMF. The IMF, its growth projections and how the world is slowing down at this point of time. India is also slowing down in a way, but still is in a healthy bracket of development in that regard from 6 to 7%. And we were technically looking at the reasons and the impacts of what this could have in the long run. And that was that as of right now, inflation is the issue, but that could easily link up to and become a recessionary trend in the next year. Then we moved on to the concept of the RTI, that how the right to information has now been diluted, and we looked at the massive number of pendency cases and how that is a concerning news for us, you and me, and how for good governance and accountable democracy, it is important that the RTI regime is not diluted. There are vacant seats with regards to information commissioners. There are 2 states with no state information commissioner. And more than that, the Central Information Commission itself is defaulting on a lot of information which needed to be provided over a period of time. And now what we've understood is the NCRB data, suicide and mental health. This is an important topic because we all at one level do struggle with this also with regards to mental health. UPSC preparation itself is a stressful process. So you need to understand one thing very, very clearly. Yes, the digital age has empowered us and given us the whole world at our feet. However, at the same point of time, it is also a problem because we live in the world of gratification through likes and digital media. But technology is not just to blame, and the Tamil Nadu case study tells us that the state is not understanding that it is not just the technology which needs to be controlled. There are other systemic issues, and the central government has realized that technology can be used to control suicides. So I hope that you understand the first 3 topics very comprehensively, and more than that, you understand the basic purposes in the examination. Moving on to the second last topic, which is Google versus the NBDA, which is the News Broadcasters and Digital Association, NBDA. Now, what is this concept? And because the Competition Commission of India has been involved, the CCI has been involved, therefore it becomes an interesting case. And this is something which we find precedents all across the world at this point in time, in Australia, in EU, and now in India. We are seeing that Google is now being taken to different commissions which are related to unfair practices in market, which is monopoly behavior. So what is this concept? The concept is that in India, there are two types of media, which is offline and online. When we talk about offline media uses a lot of ad revenue. 2/3 of their revenue is more or less ads. On the other hand, in online, you seek ads via different vendors. So you have spaces on your platform. So you would have the Hindu newspaper itself, or even the Indian Express. Their websites have spaces for ads, and they have vendors who then auction these spaces to different people, to different tech companies, to different companies who want to sell their basic product. Now the point is that there are a lot of vendors, but Google is the biggest one. And what the different organizations, even the Indian News Society is trying to talk about, and what the NBDA has also pointed out, is because it is the biggest player and 95% of all search related news is linked to Google. Google is asking for, at this point of time, 49% of the revenue generated through ads. So it is only 51-49 ratio in which they are actually asking for the share of the revenue, which is quite a lot with regards to any other vendor. But the problem is, we consume content via search engines. If you have to think about something, even if you had to look for CNA, you would go to Google and type comprehensive news analysis Byjus, and it will then take you to YouTube, which is again a Google specific server. Now the basic point is that because Google is one of the foremost, the most important search engine in the world, they can't ignore it. And Google Ads is a very important vendor when it comes to any ads. So the concept is very simple. Google is practicing unfair trade practices because it has a monopoly. There's nobody else who can actually act like Google right now. And while Google will say that we're taking that 49% for our own development, it is a core issue that because Apple, Google, Amazon, these MNCs control everything with regards to certain spaces, it becomes very difficult to ignore them. And the Competition Commission in India will take up this issue. There has been issues with regards to the EU also, with how Google is acting in that sense. And this is also concerning because in the world of free market, this type of behavior only is anti-competitive, and the more the monopoly, the more we have less choices, the more the Google becomes a necessity, which is never good. They already have all our data. They know who you are, what is your birth date. They even sometimes know your card details, everything they know about you. And now what they're trying to argue is that when it comes to ad revenue, they're asking for a cut which is unrealistic, but we have to pay it because it's the dominant player in that regard. So on October 6th, the News Broadcasters and Digital Association approached the Competition Commission of India against search engine operator Google, alleging that the latter had deprived them of their justifiable revenue acquired from news dissemination on the tech giants platform. And the complaint would then be clubbed together with similar cases filed by the Indian Newspaper Society in February and the Digital News Publishers Association last year. So basically, since last year, we are seeing different platforms, first this, then this, and now this, who are trying to technically point this out to the Competition Commission of India that Google is performing and acting in an anti-free market way, and more than that, in a monopolistic way. So let's go further and dwell deeper into the concept. The core issue is the NBDA argues that Google search engine commands 94% of the market share in the country. So any search happens, 94% of that happens on Google. The search engine, by way of its algorithms, internal quality vetting, determines which news website would be prioritized in the search queries. So what will come first is technically decided by Google. With online proliferation, there's an increasing reliance of these publishers on their digital ad revenues. Now basically, if that is the case, if you ask for any major chunk, then it's a basic revenue gone into the hands of Google. So it is essential to understand that a search engine is very important to determine how online news is consumed and which news will come first, and Google has its own understanding with regards to that, its own algorithm and basic markers which are used to put a news on the top. A news website selling advertising spaces on its platform through ad exchanges would then also have to deal with the Google ads in that regard. In addition to this, Google also operates a platform that manages publishers' sale of online ads, tools to purchase display ad spaces. So Google is the search engine. Google also is a vendor which can get you digital ad spaces and is also the arbitrator between the ad space and the person who wants that ad space. So basically, ad exchanges used to be a very big thing. However, Google is also managing that, which means that Google is the judge, jury, and the executioner, everything in that regard, because with 94% control over the market itself, it can ask for anything, and if you don't give that, your news or your website would go down. And nobody in this world wants to scroll down. They first click whatever comes first, and that is the basic point which they're exploiting. So when we look at this issue a little bit more further and in much more detail, the DNPA has pointed out that the website publishers receive only 51% of the advertisement revenue. It has been alleged that owing to the tech giant's dominance in the space, the publishers have been forced to integrate content on their platform which is related to Google, and have been forced to pay this very high premium of 49% on ad revenues to Google. And this is not something which is specific to India, because it is happening all across the world, because the European Publishers Council filed an antitrust complaint against Google with the European Commission also, challenging its existing ad tech stranglehold over publishing and specifically the press. Australia also introduced a media bargaining code in February to address this imbalance, where the media houses can bargain with Google how much should be the share. And according to Google, and this is Google's basic understanding, the revenues accrued are spent towards running a complex evolving business, such as maintaining data centers, further technological investments, enabling innovation that increases publishing revenue or publishers revenue, and maximizing advertisers return on investment, among other things. So their understanding is we needed to develop our own self, which technically is not a good justification, because every company is trying to do that, and it doesn't mean that Google is specific to improving itself. So this topic is related to what we call as anti-free market concept, which is that at the end of the day, Google, even Apple, even Amazon at this point of time control too much of the market, which means that they can do anything and everything at this point of time. So it's a concerning concept. Let's see how this pans out. What is the judgment which is given by the Competition Commission of India? We'll be here with the judgment itself. But as of right now, this is a concerning concept. It's something which can be asked in GS paper 3 with regards to cyberspaces and Google's domination. It's an ethical issue also, because it's related to monopolies. So it's an important topic for your examination. With this, let's enter the last topic, which is RBI's recovery tracker. And this is a very interesting topic. I wanted to discuss it with you because it shows a lot of charts which we can analyze to see how people are perceiving the economy. So what has happened is that the RBI took a very important survey recently, and this survey tried to see what is the people's perception. Consumers Perception Index it is called, how the consumers are perceiving the economy. So the share of urban consumers' pessimism about the Indian economy continues to decline, which is that we are not that pessimistic that the economy is tanking, and this is better than what happened during the COVID-19 pandemic. But the share of the pessimists about the economy was still double the share of those who were optimistic, which is technically showing that the perception of the people is still a little bit bad. So though people believing that the economy is in a bad shape have decreased, it is still double to people who believe that the economy is totally in a proper space. So the optimism is being overpowered by pessimism, and that very beautifully can be seen through different graphs at this point of time, and I would like to discuss them with you. So I'll go into each one of them separately with what the article wants to say, but let's try to see them on face value. So this graph shows us that was the economic situation worsening or worsened. Here 59.2% said yes, which is a very big number, but as you can see it has gone down from what it was. 26% people believe that it's better, but the double believe that it's not better. Same way, when it comes to employment, when the people were asked that has your employment become worse or you are in a worse shape in your employment, 54% said yes, which shows that still half of the people are in a very bad state when it comes to the economy. But what is the most concerning out of all of them is that 94% of the people believe that prices have increased over the past 1 year. And this is technically not a surprise because that has been the case, but this is consistent. People still believe that prices are too high. And when we talk about has your income level decreased, there are 34% people who still believe that it has decreased, but this is a less quantum in that regard. But if you look at the next set of charts, it is equally interesting. What does chart 2, 3 and 4 say is, chart 2 shows you the basic growth in the orders of the different manufacturing companies which are surveyed by the RBI. So the orders have shown an uptick, which is a good thing, and it shows that consumption is coming back to the level it was. When we talk about chart 3, it is even more interesting to see that in the service and infrastructure sector, the turnover has increased. Again, the turnover has increased, and this is the most indicative, which is that when RBI asked the lenders what was the lending tendency or lending pattern, what we see is that lending in all sectors, be it agriculture, manufacturing, infrastructure or services, has increased, which means that people are looking for credit. If they're looking for credit, it means that there is some form of growth. So without going into what is written, just looking at it, it shows that still people don't believe that the economy is truly out of the pandemic. This is again something which I've been developing for 2 to 3 weeks now. But when we talk about the sector wise understanding, growth is there, lending is increasing and turnover is increasing, order numbers have increased, which is in the larger perspective encouraging. So chart 1 shows the respondents from the RBI survey conducted across 19 major cities between 1st to 10 September. When asked about their current perception about the economic situation, 59.2% said that it has worsened in September 2022. More than that, this is the lowest share since the pandemic outbreak. However, who believed that the economic situation improved is 26%, but still double argue that the economic situation is worse. If you look at chart number 2, which is this one, this is when 734 companies were asked about their demand, what was the number of orders which they got. The latest data from April-June 2022 shows that new orders increased for manufacturing firms in the last 4 quarters. So this is again something which is increasing. Now on the other hand, chart number 3 and 4 shows us that the RBI surveyed the service and the infrastructure sector, and the data corresponds to July and September 2022. And when we looked at the turnovers, did it increase, decrease or stood still, we see that there is a positive number. There's a positive number. Both have shown an increase in their turnover. If you link it up with chart number 4, which is lending patterns, we are seeing that manufacturing, service, infrastructure are firmly on the recovery path because every sector lending has increased. So this is how you interpret this data, and I don't care about the basic raw data. What I am seeing is that yes, turnover has increased, yes, the orders have increased, and yes, lending has increased, which is important in the larger perspective. So before we go to the mains question, what have we done today? And this is your basic summary for today. First, we understood the IMF growth projections, which has been lowered by 0.6%. It is discouraging but encouraging in the larger picture of the world. Russia-Ukraine, along with the monetary policy, which is less than accommodative at this point of time, and the inflation and generally the pandemic all compound to this issue. There could be an impending recession coming next year because the largest 3 economies at this point of time are slowing down. So there is a chance that a recessionary trend may come by the next year. But for India, it is encouraging because we're still in the 6 to 7% bracket. Then thereafter, we tried to understand how the RTI regime has been diluted, the huge number of pendencies with regards to 3.14 lakh cases, and how this has an impact on accountability in India. Thereafter, we tried to understand the concept of suicides, mental health, and how the NCRB data is talking about a major quantum of people dying because of suicides. What the authors were trying to argue was that technology is a double-edged sword. It is also the reason for suicides, but it is also a remedy, and suicides in India needs to be understood in a much more holistic perspective. Thereafter, the last two topics concentrated, one on economics and the other one on Google, basically technology, and how Google is acting in an anti-free market way or in a monopolistic way by asking for 49% of ad revenue shares by controlling the search engine, the vendors, and the ad space itself. And the last topic which we did as of right now is the state of our economy itself. The RBI has been able to argue that yes, there is a better understanding of the economy. Pessimism is going away. Still, pessimism is overpowering the optimism, and there is a long road to our recovery, but every sector is showing an uptick, which is good, and all the negatives which we saw previously have now been overcome in that regard. With this, we can go to the mains question. Rising pendencies in RTIs undercut transparency and accountability in democracy. Analyze, a very beautiful question to understand the importance of RTI and what is happening at this point of time. With regards to mental health and suicides, technology is a double-edged sword. Elucidate. You have to demonstrate how it is a problem and a solution at the same point of time. Thank you so much for your patience. I will see you in the next CNA. Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.